Hello everyone and welcome. Today we re-tackling a question that has followed Napoleon Bonaparte for over 2 centuries. Was he truly short? Or is that just a legend? In this video we'll uncover how old French and English measurements got misread, why British caricaturists loved depicting him as a tiny tyrant, and what the emperor's own medical records actually reveal. Along the way, we'll hear eyewitness accounts, examine military logs, and even chart average heights across history. By the end, you'll know exactly how tall Napoleon really was, and why the myth of his small stature refuses to die. If you enjoy myth-busting history, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the past. Let's get started. When you hear Napoleon was short, what image pops into your mind? A tiny tyrant peering up at his soldiers? A cartoonish figure standing on a box? Today, we'll unravel this legend and see how measurement systems, translation blunders, and political cartoons joined forces to shrink the emperor in everyone's imagination. On December 2nd, 1804, his coronation day Napoleon Bonaparte was officially measured by the royal surveyor. The record reads 5 French feet and 2 French inches. Pause. The pre-revolutionary French foot was 32.48 centimeters longer than the English foot of 30.48 centimeters. When converted correctly, those 5 French feet 2 inches equal about 1.69 meters or 5 feet 6.5 inches in our modern terms. Not exactly tiny. 2 years later, during the Egyptian campaign, army doctors measured him again at 5 French feet 3 inches around 1.70 meters. Compare that to the average Frenchman of the late 18th century, who stood about 1.64 to 1.65 meters tall. Napoleon was actually 4 to 6 centimeters taller than his countrymen, hardly dwarf-sized. So where did the 52 Napoleon line come from? In Britain, newspapers and satirical prints converted his French foot measurement using the English foot 12%, shorter yielding a falsely low 1.57 meters. British caricaturists gleefully published Napoleon a mere 5'2", line after line. Meanwhile, color printing being expensive, stark black and white etchings spread like wildfire. Napoleon standing on a block to look over his troops, British grenadiers towering above him, captions mocking his short little legs. These cartoons served a purpose. In wartime propaganda, belittling your enemy is a low bar and effective. If the French emperor seemed physically inferior, perhaps his ambitions would crumble next. British audiences, already primed to view France as a continental bully, relished the image of a diminutive Corsican dictator humbled by stout British soldiers. On the flip side, French propaganda painted him larger than life literally. Official portraits by David and Gerard place him astride a rearing horse, cloaked in dramatic drapery, hand tucked into his coat. Those low-angle compositions made him tower over landscapes and crowds. French pamphlets even claimed he was over 6 feet tall, or conveniently omitted talk of his height altogether, focusing instead on his military genius and the glory of the Napoleonic Code. Across neutral nations like the United States, news traveled slowly. American papers often reprinted British prints, Napoleon the Tiny Tyrant, without correcting the units. Letters home from travelers mentioned the little emperor, and so the phrase passed into common parlance. By the time Napoleon fell at Waterloo in 1815, the myth was fixed in memory. And yet, when historians reopened the French archives' military logs, coronation records, doctors' files, the numbers lined up, 1.69 to 1.70 meters. The real battle over Napoleon's height was fought with ink, not measurement rods. We've seen the numbers now, let's look at the human side. Contemporary observers offer vivid clues about how tall Napoleon truly appeared. General Louis-Alexandre Berthier, his chief of staff, often noted in his journals that the emperor reached to just below my chin. Berthier, standing at 1.72 meters, painted a picture of 2 friends chatting eye to eye. Napoleon slightly shorter, but well within normal range for his inner circle. Foreign dignitaries offered similar notes. The Russian envoy in Paris, Count Pazzo de Borgo, after a private audience, wrote, "He stood at about my shoulder height, neither notably small nor large." Pazzo de Borgo himself was around 1.75 meters tall, suggesting Napoleon measured in the 1.68 to 1.70 range. On St. Helena, his final home in exile, British Governor Hudson Lowe recorded his height medically as 56 English measure, about 1.68 meters. Lowe didn't lampoon him as tiny. He simply logged the facts: height, weight, pulse. Even on a rocky island with nothing to gain by flattering him, nobody called Napoleon diminutive in official papers. Yet when Napoleon inspected troops, a psychological drama played out. His Swiss guards were chosen for stature minimum height, 1.78 meters, and lined up like human pillars on each side. Napoleon often stood on a low platform or wore boots with thick solace to avoid looking shorter than his hulking protectors. This tactical stagecraft fed rumors of his height anxiety, reinforcing the so-called Napoleon complex. In civilian life, visitors to his court at Elba described a man who, in plain clothes and low-heeled shoes, might have seemed smaller, but only by the standards of his grand guards and formal pageantry. In a drawing room among equal-sized nobles, he blended right in. Importance of perception. Napoleon understood the power of image. He chose uniforms with high collars and broad shoulders, designed by Parisian tailors to create a V-shaped silhouette that visually elongated his torso. His bicorn hat, perched sideways, added upward lines. In battle, he rode a tall charger named Marengo, its gait and height keeping him at eye level with generals on horseback. Even casual self-references embraced the myth. In private letters, he referred to himself as the Little Corsican, turning an insult into a quip. By owning the label, he disarmed critics and showed wit-proof that he felt no real inferiority. Yet his self-deprecating humor didn't stop him from orchestrating grand entrances, podiums draped in imperial flags, podium steps hidden by red carpets, and strategically placed lanterns to cast upward shadows. These staging choices magnified his image and ensured that crowds saw a commanding figure, not a small man. To grasp why we still believe a false story, we must look at shifting height averages and cultural narratives. In late 18th century France, widespread wars and uneven nutrition kept average adult male height around 1.64 to 1.65 meters. Napoleon, born in 1769, measured a few centimeters above this mean at 1.69 to 1.70 meters. Yet his elite Swiss guards, recruited from northern Alpine regions, averaged above 1.78 meters. That imposing lineup created a stark visual contrast, a tall guy next to average guy effect that fueled stories of Napoleon's smallness. By the 19th century's close, public health improvements pushed European male averages above 1.70 meters. A man Napoleon's height would now be seen as slightly below average. Modern viewers, comparing him to today's norms of 1.77 to 1.80 meters, easily mislabeled him short. Enter the psychological twist, the Napoleon complex. Coined in the late 1800s, it described an alleged syndrome in which shorter men overcompensate with aggression and dominance. Fueled by Victorian-era fascination with physical vice and moral character, early psychologists like Alfred Adler examined inferiority feelings in undersized individuals and pointed to Napoleon as poster child. Of course, Napoleon's real-life record, brilliant strategy, sweeping reforms, and battlefield victories had little to do with his height, but the catchy phrase stuck. Hollywood embraced the trope. Villains in early Tarzan films, spy comedies, and war dramas were often short, mustachioed, and scheming, echoing the caricature of tiny Napoleon. By contrast, heroes were tall, broad-shouldered paragons of virtue. Memes today continue the jab. Animated Napoleons on purplish tiny bodies that spin comically when they draw their sabers. Yet modern research finds no consistent link between stature and aggression. Studies in social psychology show that factors like personality, upbringing, and social context far outweigh a few centimeters of height. The short man syndrome may persist in jokes, but it fails as a scientific generalization. So why does the Napoleon height myth endure? First, simple stories endure. A small man conquering Europe fits a neat narrative, David versus Goliath reversed. Second, visual shorthand rules, cartoons, films, and memes rely on instantly recognizable symbols. A little man, big attitude, it's comedy gold. Third, we seldom revisit primary sources. It's easier to repeat a catchy caricature than dig into old measurement tables. What lessons can we draw? Whenever you hear a common fact, pause, who originated it? What's the evidence? In the age of clickbait and viral social media, myths spread faster than corrections. Yet history demands scrutiny, primary records, eyewitness logs, and reliable archives. Napoleon's case reminds us that perception often trumps reality. A misconverted foot and a slew of cartoons reshaped collective memory. But the data 1.69 to 1.70 meters remain unchanged. That's the power of facts. As you close this exploration, ask yourself, what other well-known truths have you accepted uncritically? How might measurement quirks or cultural biases distort what you think you know? In our fast-paced world, a healthy dose of skepticism is your best compass. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed unraveling this myth, please like, subscribe, and share which historical legend we should debunk next. Remember, truth may not be as sensational as fiction, but it stands taller in the end.